Welcome back, everyone. It's Nifilmism. We actually recorded 2 episodes, and we didn't have a 4 month span in between. I'm Drew,
I'm Ryan.
and today we're going to talk about the Netflix quirky choose your own adventure, Bandersnatch. It is a long form Black Mirror episode, and it is very interesting and worth your time if you want to take advantage of the interactivity element of Netflix that you would imagine somebody would have come up with it. I mean, it makes sense that the Black Mirror group were the ones that came up with it first, but it's amazing to think that this is like an avenue that could happen in other products.
And I'm going to say that this is our first glimpse into the future of cinema.
Of entertainment.
Yeah, because at some point entertainment is just going to be one catch-all phrase. Because,
I mean, you thought we peaked at movie theater seats rubbing your balls or making you smell things.
well, video games have gotten more movie-like over the years to the point that remember the game what was it? Heavy Rain or Hard Rain?
Heavy Rain, yeah.
Heavy Rain, yeah.
The David Cage games that everybody, laments, but they're far more interactive cinematic experiences than they are gameplay, basically.
This is what that reminded me of.
Yeah, but it's far more leaning into the we're trying to provide a cinematic experience where you having control of the narrative is an element that that affects what you're seeing, which is, in my opinion, okay.
Well, you've never watched Black Mirror.
No, but I know the concept. I'm surprised I haven't bothered binging on it because it's basically millennial Twilight Zone or millennial Outer Limits, which is cool.
I've watched the first probably season and a half. I'm glad that I at least had that little bit of background going in. If you've read the synopsis,
yeah, I mean,
this
do
kept the tone.
Do you think the franchise is hindered by the technological element being an aspect of almost every episode? Do you think they should lean more into just we want to tell weird stories?
No, not at all. Because at this point, when you're back in the what years were the original Twilight Zone? 60s,
late
70s?
Late 60s, maybe mid 60s because it was black and white, but that may have been a thematic choice.
Yeah, well, you can. Yeah, it's weird that I don't know what years the original.
Because it doesn't matter because they're timeless.
This is going to have an issue in a number of years when the technology eclipses the technology that's. So this is not going to have the longevity of that episode of The Twilight Zone where the guy, his only wish is to just be able to read, so he's the last man on Earth, but then he breaks his glasses. I mean, that is a very universal. Everyone's going to know what a library is, at least I hope.
Yeah.
And yes, some of that might end up. This will end up being dated at some point, but while it's still fresh, it's definitely more biting because it's so believable for our future.
Yes.
There's nothing that there's a few, but most of the stuff that you've seen in, or the synopses you've read for,
is kind of stuff
Black
that
Mirror.
We currently have just turned up to 11.
Yes, exactly. But for those of you who don't know, now that we're almost 4 minutes in, Bandersnatch is the first that I'm aware of choose your own adventure movie.
I mean, there've been board games that have done it with VHSs where you rewind to a certain point or you fast forward to a certain point, but I think this is the first time any like mainstream property that people have name recognition with
done by a major studio.
Has bothered to do it to where it's completely easily accessible thanks to modern streaming services. I mean, there's been stuff in the past like Sega CD, I think, had Night Trap, which is a game that
oh my god,
but like stuff like that's been done, like PC games and things like that. But like this is a movie where you hit left or right on your controller and it affects the movie, which is really lazy in terms of like your efforts, but it's interesting to see where it goes because it actually they've shot everything. There must have been so much time put into just
shooting and reshooting. And
can you imagine having to be the continuity person on this? That had to have been the worst job ever.
I also can't tell if this movie technically has the best or worst editor ever. Because technically they're not editing anything, because outside of the scene to scene stuff, in terms of when you think of editing as an overarching regularly structured movie, you're editing scenes together to tell a cohesive story.
Yeah. Which honestly is where I have detriments with this because of the choose your own adventure aspect of it. But
but on the other hand, this may be the most brilliant editing team ever, because they had to edit it in such a way that no matter what choices you made, it still gives you a coherent story.
Yes.
Where to even start with this? I mean, there's so much to unpack with this.
Well, let's just go into it as if it's a basic plot summary.
Go ahead.
Spoilers, we're gonna spoil
one version of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a basic like Twilight Zone-y Black Mirror kind of plot where it's 84. Stefan is this kid who is adept at programming, and he has inherited from his mother who is dead, and you find out why. Depending on what you do, you find out why or you don't. From his mother a choose your own adventure book called Bandersnatch, which she wants to adapt into a choose your own adventure game. And he gets contacted by a upstart independent programming company that wants to license the game from him. And you get early on, you get an idea that he's on medication for some reason. He doesn't have that great of a relationship with his father, and that's basically what the plot of the story is he wants to make this game, but there's something off.
And then there are some horror elements too. Like there's a whole tragedy behind the author of Bandersnatch, where he had killed his family. That happened, right?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's before things get interesting. But no,
but
like
then,
the author had killed his wife because in the course of writing this book about making choices, he felt that he realized you don't make any choices in life. You're not in control of anything.
And that is where the first and major meta element, I will admit I was a little messed up when I watched this movie. So maybe some of it seemed a little more profound in my foggy state than it actually was. But there was a moment of clarity where I realized, holy crap, there's a possibility that no matter what I choose for this choose your own adventure, it's going to give me the same ending no matter what. And on top of that, he actually brings that up as one of the ways that he could edit the game, so that it just gives the person doing it the illusion of choice.
What's great about it is if you make the quote right choices early on, you get an early game over, a movie over.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a really good teaching tool to like show you that like really contemplate what you're doing, because if you go through it like I did the first time, where it's just, I think the first two have no bearing on anything. I think choosing what you eat for breakfast, what he eats for breakfast, and what he listens to on the way to the office make no difference. I think those are just, hey, this is how this is going to work. Well, you're making choices.
They do have slight impact later on in terms of if you choose the one band and then the other programmer asks you what you're listening to, he then gives you other music recommendations.
Oh, I intentionally said fuck. Now that's what I call music, because I hate compilation shit like that. I'll pick an actual like artist at the time. But
yeah, no, it actually impacts his musical recommendations to you later on. But is it impact on the plot?
But in terms of weighting you into how this is going to go, I don't think which serial you pick matters.
Right, exactly.
But no, because if you pick like if when Stefan gets the offer to like make the game in office, and you're like, well, this makes sense. Like he's an indie programmer, he has a rudimentary understanding of how to do this, and here's a like prodigy programmer in the department. Why would you not make it there? You get the quick like, oh, the game feels like it was made by a committee. It's not good, and you're like, wait, what? and this is where at least my viewing started to make me mad. Is the Colin character is excellent, and I wanted more of him, but my choices ruined that.
So you only watched this recently. I watched it the first weekend it came out. So we probably got two very different experiences.
Yes. But if you choose to work in house, Colin says wrong choice, and you're like, oh, that's your first sign. Like knowing that you're making choices for the character, you're like, shit, this character might be meta aware.
Oh, because when I did it, I chose work from home.
No, I chose work in the office at first, and you immediately from Colin get a wrong choice,
Interesting.
and you're like, what? Because you immediately go to the game reviewer screen, and you get the early choose the other branch hint, the don't do what you just did because you ended early. So I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So yeah, basically, if you choose to work from home, that's where the real story starts.
Wow. Okay. It's been a while. That sounds vaguely familiar. I can't remember if maybe I went back and rewatched part of it. Or...
I was thinking about doing it today, but then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to bother because I will admit you get fatigue watching this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not exactly.
Even though they do a good job of speeding up recaps, you get to a point where you're just like, I'm not getting the results I want, and I think that's meta. Like that's a meta choice to make you angry because your choices or Stefan's choices don't matter.
No.
Because you kind of get funneled down certain paths depending on what you do that you can't change them, to where I really wish there was an Easter egg in the entire movie where there was a middle choice where you weren't automatically on either side and then you picked, where if you picked nothing you would let him actually control the narrative and get an entirely different film.
Do basically the director's cut the way it was intended.
Yeah. Just get a traditional Black Mirror episode out of you not forcing anything.
But what makes this a Black Mirror episode is the idea. Like, there is a point where he becomes aware that you are choosing for him. You are choosing for him, exactly.
And you get totally thrown for a loop because you get the point to choose the narrative choice or to just say your Netflix.
Yeah. And I cringed at first when I saw that.
I did not do Netflix first. I was like, I'm engrossed enough in the narrative. I want to see where this is supposed to go. As a story.
I really thought this is the moment that it's jumping the shark. And I'm not sure that I like this. But then I picked the Netflix choice.
Uh-huh.
Did you choose that?
I did, but I didn't follow through with the fight scene because I was like, this is already self-indulgent enough. I want what the intent of the actual story is, not the fun Easter egg stuff.
Which is a little difficult to discern because
how are you supposed to know? There's a myriad of options at the end.
Right.
Of which we probably got two different ones. I got one out of laziness because I deliberately chose something that would end that route.
There's some little
instead
stuff
of continuing on with something else.
We'll get back to that, but there's one scene where it asks you to put in a series of numbers. And
yeah, I did it 3 or 4 times, and it changes every time you do it.
Oh,
it does. Because it's not the same two options. It's not a binary option.
The dial the phone number, right?
Yes,
did you get it right at any point, or did it hang up?
There are 2 right answers, at least from where I went.
Because I never got back to that screen.
Yes.
So I have no idea what happens.
Depending on where you go, there are 2 right answers, and you get 2 entirely different scenes out of it.
I didn't get any of this.
Yep.
Because I don't know what happened, but either messed up putting the numbers in, or...
Well, are you talking about the dream sequence with his dad's office? Because there are multiple versions of that.
Yes, there are, and I've gotten in a couple different ways.
I think I didn't do the phone thing wrong. I just did it the recommended way, and then.
But the phone thing, where it gives you that rapid fire set of clues and it asks you to put in a series of numbers. All that I got was him looking at a phone that was dead and putting the phone down.
Yeah.
So I don't know what was supposed to have happened there, if you get the right number.
Yeah.
But maybe one day I'll go back. But I think we're getting off topic, but I do think that it is that meta element that really makes it feel tonally like a regular Black Mirror episode.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of somebody being stuck in a Netflix-style TV show for someone else's entertainment.
Yes.
But then with the hyper meta element
of identifying yourself as a Netflix user.
Go a layer up, though. I identify myself to the character as a Netflix user, but then I have the illusion of control, when in reality the underlying theme is that my choices may not actually matter anyway.
Yeah. What you hope to see won't be what you see, because you're just getting whatever the character
Am I being controlled by Black Mirror, not knowing that?
Yeah.
and thinking that I am controlling the actions of someone 2 tiers down.
Yeah, because I think it is exhaustive, which is why I have issues with it. But there I don't know if you got to this point, but there became a point in the narrative that you would make a choice because you had been to that choice multiple times before and getting the same annoying result, and you're like, I'm gonna pick the opposite and hope that you the character choose to rebel against what I'm telling you to do, because I think that's more interesting to me.
Yeah, especially
because I fell down a tree where he had to kill his father, and I was like, I don't want him to kill his father because I don't think narratively that makes sense.
No,
but you're like, I'm gonna pick it because I've picked it against it 4 times and gotten an ending, and I want you to not do it, and yet he doesn't. And then at that point, I was like, you know what? I know the dog's gonna dig up the body. Just bury the body. Don't chop it up. I don't fucking care about watching the rest of this. And that's the point where I got to. Because I know you could have probably chopped the body, and there probably would have been more scenes after that. But I'm like, I'm tired of this.
Part of it though comes off as freshman college philosophy 101 derivative.
Oh yeah, the
illusion of choice.
Hanging out and smoking weed and taking acid is the most like traditional. Yep, this is how this is depicted in every media format ever.
But just the entire theme of it is part of me reveled in the idea of, oh, okay, I need to really look at this and examine whether or not my choices matter, knowing that his don't. Do mine matter at all? But at the end of the day, I look at myself and say, oh, well, that it's embarrassing that I had those thoughts, because that's pretty basic stuff. So I really wish there was a definitive answer, like you said, to know what the plot is supposed to be, so I can just sit back and absorb it.
And that's what makes you feel small, is that you're just like, just give me a crafted story. But I don't think that's small thinking. I think it's, if you have a true point, I want to see it so that I can not necessarily like critique but like reflect upon it.
Yeah.
But having me make choices and feel like I'm getting narrative dead ends kind of lessen the product.
But you can't separate the two, because if the entire theme of the story is supposed to be whether or not your choices matter, you could tell a story about that. But the Colin
character literally tells you that it doesn't matter. You just get another try.
But he dies.
But it's like ridiculous because he dies in a dream sequence, but he's really dead after that point. At that point where I realized, oh, I'm not going to see the actual interesting character in this story. I don't care anymore.
So the ending that I got was he makes the choice to get on the train with his mother. Did you get that?
No, but I read about it in that like it kills him in real life, in the real time.
Yes, because basically you're going back and altering something in the past. So now that you've died,
very
somehow.
Darko.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Weird mirror effects and everything.
And you see the camera on the character at the therapist's office, and he's dead, and no one can explain why he's dead. That was the ending that I got.
Interesting. No, the one that I just got tired of making choices and went with was he realizes you're controlling him. You give him the flowchart symbol. Yeah. And he ends up killing his father at your choice, because if you don't try to kill his father calms him down, and then the episode ends. Which I was fine with.
I don't think you got the ending then.
Because what you do is you kill his father, and then he makes the phone call. You call the office, and at that point, depending on what you said in the dream, he says like he either doesn't make the phone call, because if you got a dream sequence where he thinks his dad's controlling his life, he calls the doctor and says, I know about the whole plan, and I killed him, I'm gonna kill you, I know you're controlling me. And at that point you eye roll and you're like, this is just garbage.
I actually kind of liked,
but if you get the dream sequence that's the like he thinks he can go back and like save his mom by getting the rabbit, but choose not to go with her, he wakes up, realizes you're controlling him, kills his father because that's the only way to keep the narrative going. And then before he's able to bury his father, Tucker calls him and says, I need the game by tonight.
Yes, I got that too.
Yeah, I can finish it. And then you go to bury him, and you get a little scene of the other programmer's girlfriend coming in, and she's like, "Where the hell is he?"
Yeah,
and they're like, "Oh, the last person we saw him was Stefan." So then she shows up at the house as you're trying to bury your father, and you're like, "I don't know where he went." And then she's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, I know you. I've seen you before." And she's like, "I've never met you in my life because you only met her in an alternate path you took in the game or the movie." And she's like, "Where the hell is he?" And he's like, "He jumped." And then she's like, "What does that mean?" He's like, "Bye," and closes the door. So then what you have the choice is to bury your father or chop him up. I chose with bury because I'm like, I've had enough. I'll let the dog find him. Because that's an easy tell early on in the thing. Yeah. Oh, the dog chews up the garden. And what happens is Tucker releases the game even though you were caught and convicted. And Tucker wants money.
It goes gangbusters.
And no. Tucker goes out of business. Tucker's out of business, so it's his last thing. And he's like, "Well, I'm a victim too because I gave money to this guy who's a sociopath." And like my whole games division collapsed.
Well, there's another version though where yes, you're still convicted, but because of the controversy around it, the game takes off. But the way it's supposed to work is you get a bunch of false endings, and each one essentially has the game review or whatever. But there does come a point where it is a traditional roll credits,
and you get a roll credits anyways.
But there's a point where it doesn't let you possibly backtrack.
No, the same thing.
Really?
Yep. If you get convicted, regardless, you get end credits. You get an ending. You don't get a chance to go back and redo something.
Because
after you kill the father, you don't get a choice, at least in the paths I took, to go back and choose to chop him up or bury him.
Because I did.
Really?
I got a chance to go back.
Oh, okay.
That's why this thing took almost 2 hours for me.
Yeah. Like I said, it just gets exhausting. I think that's intentional.
Right, because at some point you have to just say, okay, I've seen enough of it.
This is a visual medium. I just want a story.
Yeah.
Give me some form of a story. I mean, I guess it's cool because you could go back and get a different ending. Like I could go back and watch it and get something completely different, which I might do. I was thinking about doing it today, but it's just the experience is exhausting enough that you're like, I don't want to go back.
It is, right.
And I think that's kind of the thing where it's like, are you that willing to just give up your free will?
There's nothing compelling enough about the story after the initial experience of it.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't be just checking Twitter or whatever as I was going through it.
As soon as I finished my end, I'm like, how close did I get to the true ending? And you're like, there's no true ending because it's choose your own. But it's like, I feel like there had to have been some kind of intentional like thread from the writer of this episode.
I don't really know if they had a point. I think the point was simply to make you question the free will aspects, but I'm not sure that they actually had anything to say about free will. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Because I mean, if you get a super derivative plot where it's like, oh yeah, like there's something spooky about that story that anybody involved in it gets embroiled in the lack of choice and goes insane. And it's like, cool, I guess. That would have been a good Twilight Zone episode. I didn't need the interactivity and 2 hours of my life wasted telling me this.
But I think that driving, like, you could watch an episode about that basic concept of, okay, well, it's a choose your own adventure, and the irony is that you actually don't have any choice.
Yeah.
But that's a story that's been told before.
True.
Like, we've already talked about Donnie Darko and talking about the choices that you make.
Yeah.
I think that giving the viewer, making the viewer more invested by having the viewer being the person to actually make the choices drives that point home more than just a traditional episode would. But like you said, it also robs you of knowing what the actual intent of the writers was.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it would have been cool if there were either the Easter egg option of you don't make any choices and you just get an episode. Would have been really cool. Or the deeper you go, the less your control has any control.
Do you know the Stanley Parable?
Yes.
Were you thinking about the Stanley Parable when you were watching this?
Has so many options. So many options.
I know, but that's also a video game.
It's very much in the and in the sense that the Stanley Parable is playable but it is branching pathways. Like, you kind of fell into that rut, especially if you're like me and you're like, I just want the real story. Just give me the real story. Like, Stanley Parable has no real story. It's just it's just a really cool tool to show a choose your own. And I feel like there's only so much shot for this that there has to be a true narrative.
Or does there?
Exactly. And I think that diminishes it to me.
But does that diminish the Stanley Parable for you?
No. Because the Stanley Parable is interesting.
Do you want to just quickly tell our audience what the Stanley Parable is?
The Stanley Parable is I think it's a Gary's mod from using the Half-Life 2 engine, where you're just in traditional, like,
you're in an office.
But there's a narrator that basically starts saying what you're supposed to do. And then you can do that, or you can do the opposite. But the narration is what makes it, because it reacts to what you do.
Yeah, if you're supposed to go to a meeting that's down the left-hand hallway.
Stanley is supposed to take like a left and go into the staff meeting, and you chose not to. The narration doesn't like drop a beat.
Yeah, it says even though Stanley knew that the meeting room was not down the left-hand hallway, he went to the right anyway.
Yeah.
And just little things, like if you're in a closet. This is a broom closet. There's nothing further that you can do in here. And it just, every possible option has...
there's so much pathing in it. It's insane.
But I found myself thinking about the Stanley Parable the whole time I was watching this.
But what this has over that is you're not a player-controlled character. Like, you've got a character that has a life beyond what you're controlling. That has a background that you had no input into, which makes you more invested in trying to make choices. Like, you get to a point where you just want, like, to not ruin him.
Oh, absolutely. I was really hoping at some point.
And that's why I got so mad when I got, like, you have to kill your dad. Like, no, I want him to make, like, I want catharsis. I want him to, like, realize neither of them is at fault here.
Yeah, I was really, I wanted just a narrative option where maybe he gets the help that he needs. But then that also brings up the question, if they're not giving you that option, was that an intentional narrative tool?
Yeah. And that's where some of, like, the issues are where it's like, oh, like, as somebody who's aware of this kind of thing, are you seeing more options that you know aren't going to be here? And that kind of diminishes.
To switch around a phrase, damned if you do, damned if you do. I mean, no matter what, that could be the point of sometimes your previous choices lead you to a point that no matter what path you take, your previous choices have gotten you to a point where there is no redemption.
Yeah, it just becomes a point where you're like, okay, I know enough of Black Mirror that there's going to be something, like, fucked up that's going to happen, and I have no ability to stop that. Like, and that just kind of, it really isn't a choose your own. There is a bit of a narrative through line regardless of where you are in the narrative that, like, you have no control over. And that's by design, because the whole plot is essentially, like, him kind of coming to a point where, oh no, maybe there is no choice in anything we do. Like, regardless of the fact that you're making choices for him, like, that, it becomes overt once it's obvious that he's rebelling against you directly. But, like, before it gets to that hammy of a point, it's just kind of like oh no, like, there really is no choice.
Or there is choice, but your choices don't matter, I guess, would be the bleaker way to look at it. Well, on that note...
should you have chosen to listen to us ramble on and on about this incoherently?
Yeah.
You made the wrong choice.
Yeah. Somebody in a meta-universe where you are a Netflix character chose to click a button that says, listen to this shitty podcast... And now you spent the last half hour doing that. Any final thoughts on Bandersnatch? Would you recommend it?
I would. I like the dedication to, like, it looks like 84.
Yes.
Like, setting wise, and then, like, it's entirely rewatchable. If you want to go through it, it's infinitely rewatchable almost. And it's worth it just to choose the Netflix option to try to explain somebody in the pre-internet era what Netflix is. Just for the exasperation of what is streaming. What does that mean?
But we'll let you take a look at that. I mean, this. I will say one final thought is that despite the dearth of despite the lack of top-notch content, at least in Netflix's movies or Cloverfield Paradox a year ago, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
They're getting a reputation for the whole, oh, it's a shit movie, dump it to Netflix.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that even if this is technically just part of an episode on a TV show series, it is being more marketed as the movie tied to the series. The fact that Netflix can still put out something feature length that I think was better than average.
Yeah, it's a. In closing, I'd say it's an experience. It can be exhausting if you're, like, if you feel like there's something that you're supposed to do.
Let me ask one last closing question then. What would you do if you went into a movie theater that was set up like an old school, like at least when I was in college, a lot of the 101 courses with 400 students had clickers where the professor could ask a question, everyone got to answer, and then you could see how everybody was answering. Would you ever go into a movie theater where a movie like this was playing, where the audience got to choose the narrative?
No.
Or is this something that you would only do if you had your own personal choice?
Only personal choice. I can't stand the masses.
So if this is something that, if this is the future of entertainment, not saying that it is, but if this was the future of entertainment, does that mean that the future of entertainment is something that is strictly going to be a personal, at home, on your own TV versus large screen cinema? Especially in an age when things like Disney are
probably. I mean, you probably see stuff like this pop up because now there's the evidence that it can work. But I think if cinema as an art is about trying to relay a message.
Yes.
And I think that message is only clear if it's direct, if it's more overt. I think it's the true intention of cinema as storytelling is you're trying to relay something that on your own you wouldn't necessarily find.
And I would sincerely hope so, because you look at a movie like one of my favorites in the last couple of years, Blade Runner 2049, and
you think about it in terms of like a Skinner box. Like if you had two buttons and one button always gave you like candy.
Yeah.
And you knew nothing else. This is getting like Allegory of the Cave almost. But you knew nothing else other than the shadows on the wall and the candy on the right hand button. Why would you ever press the left button? And if you press it and you got nothing, why would you ever press the left button again? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think in a way, film still is going to be narrative driven. This might happen more often as a curiosity.
But it's not going to replace.
No.
Good. And I don't want people to think that I'm more of a hack than I am by thinking that that's where I think that things are going. No.
Because
I know that
3D is the future of cinema.
On that note, thank you for listening.
Fuck wearing glasses over your glasses. I will never go to a 3D picture. I never have. Good night.
We will be back, and hopefully it won't be another 4 months. Thanks again for listening.